I'd like to call the meeting of the Utility Commission to order. Unfortunately, the Florida Power and Light will not be here today. They requested a little bit more time so they could give us a more complete response to the situation. And so they're not going to be here today. And so with respect to that, under new business, we don't have item A. And I'd like to defer item B, the discussion of the correspondence, until we can have Florida Power and Light here. So with that being said, that would mean what I'd like to do today is just really review the goals that had been set and set new goals, and adopt the goals that we had before, and agree if there's any changes that we need to make to that for what we're going to do for the next year, since we now have a new commission. And I think it's very helpful to have the goals, and then makes it much easier to review our progress at the end of the year. So with that being said, do I need a motion for item B, Sherry?
To pull them? Yes.
Yes, okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, just a clarification, you're taking item 3 off the agenda?
Yes. Florida Power and Light's not going to be here today. They've requested more time.
No, just by a clarification.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so I make a motion then that we pull A and B off today's agenda and put them back when Florida Power and Light can reschedule.
What the hell
All in
do I do with
favor?
the agenda?
Okay, thank you very much. Well, hopefully then we'll have a nice short meeting. So public comments, the next order of business. Mr. Wilson.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, and that is the way to take something off the agenda. I appreciate you're doing it that way. Thank you so much. I looked at the last meeting, and I just have a couple of questions. One of the members of the committee had mentioned in that meeting that there were some documents that member had that perhaps the rest of the committee did not have. Can you tell me, Mr. Chairman, are those documents that he referred to in that last meeting included in the documents that have been passed out today?
Well, I can't tell you that. I haven't had a chance to go through all the documents that have been passed out today. Mm-hmm. I believe, Jim, was that the red line document?
No, I think it might have been. I'm not sure. Me that asked for some documents, partly because I've been off for a while. To my knowledge, I received the documents. All of those documents were public domain and had been for some time. I was just trying to catch up.
Okay.
And I'm not sure that that's exactly what you wanted. But
well, it was Mr. Christopher referred to a document in his discussions that he had that I had not seen before, and I did not know whether Mr. Christopher had gotten that document from this committee or from the clerk or from the FMPA. So I guess my question is twofold. Number one, does Mr. Christopher or any other member of this council have documents that the other council members do not have? And then the second question is, where did that, if there are documents, where did those documents come from? So my question to probably the city attorney is, have there been individual ex parte communications between members of this committee and the FMPA, particularly the counsel for the FMPA, Mr. Bryant? And I believe that any correspondence or phone calls or phone records between members of this commission and the FMPA would be public record. And is that not correct?
Wayne, do you?
Yeah. Certainly, if there's any discussions about the business that would be coming for the board, that would be a public record having to do with, city business, having to do with, any correspondence with members or phone calls or what have you. But, as far as members,
So my public question to this board, and perhaps to Mr. Christopher, should he decide he wants to answer it, has he been in contact with the FMPA, and has he received any documents, and has he had any discussions with Mr. Bryant? If he has not, then fine, we'll go ahead. It just, from the conversation in the previous meeting, it appeared that he had documents that might have come from another source. So my question to the chair, to Mr. Christopher through the chair, is, has he had, and I want to tell him also that I have made a public information request to the FMPA for any such correspondence or telephone records between the FMPA. But I wanted to give an opportunity to ask that question here in public too, so that he can just tell me no, and that would be fine. I'll take him as word.
Okay. I do remember, I think I remember that discussion, but Mr. Christopher, would you care to answer? Or?
What's the question? I heard part of it, but I'll answer any question you have, Mr. Chairman. So if you have a question, I'd be pleased to answer it.
Okay. I think the question was, there was reference in the meeting to some documents that you had, and I'm not sure exactly. I mean, it's been a couple weeks. There was then some back and forth about the red line document between Mr. O'Connor mentioned that, and this is it was in the context of the OUC contract, the changes to the OUC contract. You were saying there were material changes that needed to be made. Mr. O'Connor said there were no changes that had to deal with the business aspects of that contract, and the question is do you have any information from, I'm going to make this a two-part question because I think that would answer Mr. Wilson's concerns more appropriately. Did you have any correspondence from the OUC that is, from FNPA about the OUC contract that's not been presented to all the other members of the committee?
I think it was the city council. That's it. I don't mean to be cute, sir. I don't know what the city council has. To my knowledge, I have no documents that are not in the public record. Okay.
The second question was, have you had any conversations with the board or Mr. Bryant of the FMPA?
Since what date, sir? Since the date I came on this committee? Or before then? And if it's before then, sir, I think that's totally out of order. You want me to outline conversations? I've had conversations with
Mr. Christopher,
a lot of people. I've talked with the gentleman up there. I've talked to every city council member.
Mr. Christopher, this is not my question.
I have spent a lot of time understanding this transaction.
I appreciate that, as we all have. This is not my question.
So I really think we're headed down a path. If the gentleman wants to serve on me a demand document, I'd be glad to respond to it. But asking me with whom I've spoken since I was born is totally out of order, and I'm not going down that path.
Well, I think that's a reduction to absurdity, but I can appreciate,
particularly for somebody who's been less than civil in addressing me.
I can't speak to that because I've not been privy to any less than civil conversations, but I'm not. So I can't speak to that. With respect to Mr. Wilson, is that?
Well, what that answers is that the gentleman is a fine lawyer. He does not want to answer the question, and the question simply is does he have inside information? Has he been in discussions, particularly with the lawyer for FMPA? You'll recall that we found out 2 weeks ago that in secret he was going to go with the mayor to negotiate with FMPA. It appears from his answer to the question that the parsing of words is he knows that from the time of his appointment that he has to report these things. His answer clearly indicates that he has had private, personal conversations with the FMPA and officials with the FMPA. We don't know who they are. So we don't know what kind of agreements or thoughts or conversations that they've had prior to his arrival on the Utilities Commission. And when you put it together with that he has had apparently, from his answer, and if I'm wrong, he can just say, I have never talked to people at the FMPA about the business of Vero Beach. I'm seeing that that's not the answer to the question. Apparently, Mr. Christopher has had direct conversation with the FMPA prior to him going to negotiate with the FMPA on behalf of the public of the City of Vero Beach. And what we're seeing is a non-transparency. There is something going on here, and it is called political theater. And what you have here is what we're looking forward to. This commission was asked to advise the city council. This commission is now going to pass that on until after this meeting on April the 2nd with the FMPA. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because, in my opinion, this is nothing but political theater. That what they're going to do is they're going to go up there, they're going to sit across from FMPA. FMPA is going to say, you can't get out. And they're going to say, oh my gosh, we can't get out. And he's going to come back and he's going to ask George Christopher, and George Christopher is going to say what he's always said, I've told you can't get out, and we've got to defeat this sale. It is a backdoor end of the sale. And that's what needs to be clear. Because this behind-the-scenes activity that people pretend doesn't happen is happening. And that's why my question is here. It is in public, and it is very clear. Has a member of this council had previous conversations with the FMPA that you, other people, don't know about? It is not, there is no regard to what time that happened. Did you discuss public business with the FMPA either before or since you have been made a member of the Utilities Commission? The public of Vero Beach has the right to know that. Question, has Mr. Christopher had direct conversations with the FMPA or any of its directors or staff members? Easy question.
Mr. Christopher, do you want to expand on your answer that you previously?
I'd be glad to answer any question you have, Mr. Chairman. But I would add, this is really silliness. Should we go down the table and ask, did I ever talk with Representative Mayfield? Ever talked with Councilmember
I'm sorry, sir, that's
Fletcher?
not the question. The question is, have you ever talked to FMPA?
Mr. Wilson?
Mr. Wilson, you keep your mouth shut while I'm talking.
Excuse me, sir?
Mr. Christopher, I'm the chairman here. I'll control Mr. Wilson.
I know you will. It's inappropriate what's being asked. It's in my private life. You want to start with Mr. Whittall or start over here with this gentleman, and we can go down the line and identify everybody we've talked to relating to the electrical sale in the last 5 years. Who you've talked to, Mr. Chairman, I'll fall in line.
Okay. Well, I'll.
Mr. Chairman, that's reasonable. All right. My question is, has any member of this Utilities Commission had ex parte conversations with staff of the FMPA relating to public business?
Mr. Chairman, he should go to the dictionary and look at what ex parte means. When you have a conversation with your wife, it's not ex parte. When you have a conversation with another person, it's not ex parte. It's ex parte when you are in a quasi-judicial situation and off the record you have a conversation. I think the gentleman needs to go to a dictionary.
I think this gentleman needs to answer the question.
Okay, with not being a lawyer myself, I'll be happy to answer the question, have I had any off-the-record communications?
Any direct communications with the FMPA staff or directors?
Okay, so I'll just start answering that question. And I think we have some members of the committee that have been on the committee before that were involved in the attempt to make the All Requirements Project fair and giving us fair reimbursements in that case. And so I'm going to restrict my answer in an effort to simplify their answer to the time frame of this current sale. And I have had some conversations with Barry Moline in the context of inviting him to this meeting. In the past, although that was disclosed, that was probably a couple years ago, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. I've also spoken, or I called and left a message with Nick at the FNPA relative to the request to have him or a representative come to the meeting. He did not return my call, but he did subsequently send an email to the City Council, which I believe everyone got. Is that okay? So everyone got that, where they don't have time today.
So those were disclosed. So all those were disclosed.
Well, but I'm just in an abundance of caution. Yes.
Okay.
Really,
I'd like to say, number one, I have not had conversations outside of this committee that are not part, even before when I was on it, that are not part of the public record, and the rest of it is none of your damn business, and it's not covered by the Sunshine Law as far as I can read. And you, sir, have been very, somebody said it. I can't remember the word.
What?
He said it was uncivil before he told me to shut my mouth.
Well, yeah, I'll go with that, and very much out of order as far as I'm concerned, sir. And we should control this better.
Well,
He's had his 5 minutes.
Sir, it cannot be out of order to ask for transparency from a body who is appointed to do public business. And from what I understand of
You've got no specifics, though. You've got,
Okay,
this
Yes, I do. To whom, and
Bob?
now just a moment. But I have to whom, and I've asked a very clear question. And the reason is that as I understanding of the Sunshine
Charlie?
Law, and you can yell at me
Charlie,
if you want.
We're trying to answer your question, and we're also trying to be mindful of everyone's time today. So, Mr. Grealish, do you want?
Yeah, I have a question that I think is important here, and that is what we're charged with doing here is advising the City Council, among other things, on the potential transaction between Florida Power and Light and the city. And I guess what I would like to know is that has anyone had a conversation that would lead them to believe that there are insurmountable obstacles to getting this transaction done? Because I don't want to waste my time, and I'm assuming everybody else doesn't want to waste their time. If that's not the case, if no one has heard from the FMPA, regardless of whether they've had conversations on the record, off the record, whatever, that there are insurmountable obstacles, then it seems to me the second question would be, and this is a question for you, George, is you're going to meet with Mayor Winger and the FMPA on Wednesday.
No, I'm not.
Oh, you're not? Okay. I thought you were, because if you were, I would hope that you would come back and brief us on that conversation. But because I think what we need to understand is, do you have any reason to believe that this transaction has insurmountable hurdles?
I have had conversations with numerous people, including people at the FMPA, before I was on this In those conversations, I discussed their requirements. I learned nothing that is not set forth in published documents. The FMPA position is articulated in a series of letters going back to 2007. And it's amazing how unwavering they have been in setting forth their position. My conversations sought to clarify. In no way did I learn anything, or do I know anything, that's not reflected in written documents that certainly every council member has. The chairman distributed a whole slew of them in the last week or two. And they're all a member of public record, and they relate to 3 requirements that they have put up there from day one. One relates to the city asking to be relieved of their obligations under the FMPA contracts. And if FMPA has said, fine, you find us a utility, a municipal utility that will assume your obligations. It can't be a private company, it has to be a municipal. That's one of the obligations, and that's still to be met. It's still outstanding. The second obligation is the so-called stranded costs. And I think while that hasn't been satisfied, correct me, Jim, if I'm wrong, if that hasn't been satisfied, that hasn't been satisfied in writing, I think the assumption is that can be readily satisfied if everything else were to fall in place. And the third is the so-called contingent obligation, which has never been defined as to amount.
That's to OUC?
Pardon?
That's the obligation to OUC if OUC defaults?
That's correct, Bill. That third obligation has never been defined. The city has made certain proposals. I don't think FMPA, I think their position has been show us more. And the amount there has never been established. And those obligations are all memorialized in writings, public writings, that go back to 2007 and have been repeated. And in my conversations, I have never seen anything to deviate from what the writings are.
Let me ask you a question. Anyone else can answer if they wish, but on the first condition, it has to be a muni that assumes the obligations. So they're unwilling to allow FP&L to assume those obligations. Is that correct?
They well, that's correct for very valid reasons. The bonds were tax-free bonds that were used to finance their plants, and the only people that can be party to that arrangement are tax-free organizations. Now, there isn't a so-called 3-year exception, a private sale exception for a limited period of time, and that was the window that FPL tried to walk through. And that's where the tax rulings were discussed. And there's an exception if you're buying power for a period of not to exceed 3 years at market price. And this transaction clearly is not at market price. and the argument was going to be that greater than market price is the same as market price.
How does
Mr. Christopher, excuse me, the regulation says market price, or the price that it's usually.
Say again?
So it says market price, fair market. It doesn't say market price. It says fair market value, or
Okay.
the price that it's traditionally or usually sold at. So
That's right.
buying the power from Stanton 1, Stanton 2 for the same price that they usually sell it to us for would qualify under that.
Yep.
And so I just wanted to clarify that it's not market price, it's fair market value.
Correct.
Or the
Correct.
usual selling
Correct. And
price.
you just articulated an argument that, to my knowledge, bond counsels were unprepared to give an unqualified opinion on, and no bond counsel has ever given an unqualified opinion on that. Although they've asserted it orally, there's never been a reasoned opinion produced, even though it had been promised several times to FMPA.
One of the-
And ultimately, a year ago, if we had submitted a ruling within 6 months, you probably would have had an answer. And my understanding is that the ruling was not submitted because the bond counsels, to a person, stated that it was improbable that, or it'd be very difficult to get a favorable ruling. You can still apply for that ruling, and I know it's been suggested FMPA can ignore it, but that would be difficult. The ruling would be yes, it complies, or no, it doesn't.
Mr. Christopher, where did you get this understanding from the bond counsels?
Where's my understanding from?
Yeah, what's the source of that? Because I'm not aware of that.
The lack of legal opinions, there's nothing in the record.
So your source for this is the absence of evidence, is the
Well,
source of evidence?
Let's go back to 2012. There was a meeting in April.
I just really asked a
Let me-
specific question.
let me- I
What's your
understand.
source for saying that all the unanimous has, that the
The source-
concept has been rejected unanimously by all the bond counsels? Because I'm not aware of that information.
My source is last June, they abandoned going for the ruling because, as I understood, the bond counsel said it would be very improbable to get. They abandoned getting the ruling.
I understand what happened last June, but my question
That's my
specifically-
source. My source, sir, is the fact that last June, the bond counsels met, and out of that meeting, the decision was to abandon Path A, which required a ruling, and the fact that while it's been stated that bond counsel felt that an opinion, that a ruling could be obtained, there's the way you practice law is when you're on against the other side and you say, in our opinion, this can be done, you produce a document, a reasoned legal opinion that sets it forth. FMPA several times said, give us an opinion, we'll look at it. And an opinion was never forthcoming.
Were the bond counsels that you were referring to, was that the FMPA bond counsel and the FP&L bond counsel?
The FMPA bond counsel is the only bond counsel that has written on the subject. And they have written at least 2 letters on the subject in which they raise their concerns. The city's lawyers who have bond counsel, good bond counsel, promised a legal opinion to FMPA, but that never was delivered.
Do we have, may I ask the question, does anyone have an opinion from bond counsel? Has the city received an opinion from bond counsel? And let me just say, what I'm trying to understand for myself, if nothing else, is what are the as George articulated, there are three issues, and I'm trying to delve into the three issues, and I wish FP&L were here today to figure out where FPL is and where FMPA is, so I can see whether there's a bridge here. And perhaps Mayor Winger will get into this Wednesday and brief all of us afterwards, but that's where I'm trying to drive to.
We've had several meetings. FMPA, OUC, FPL, and the city attorneys have had several meetings over the IRS issue. At the table, verbally, OUC, FPL, and our attorneys have said the 3-year window works and that we would, under normal circumstances, get a favorable ruling from the IRS. FMPA still had reservations and they had concerns and they wanted somebody to give a bond opinion, legal opinion. Our counsel, as well as FP&L, as well as OUC, were hesitant about doing that because they wanted, again, I'm not an attorney either, but to frame the question where everybody could agree. And so that was the intent, was all those attorneys were getting together to try to frame what the question would actually say, because that's the critical path when you go to the IRS. And in order to get a yes or a no, the concerns that the 3 other entities had outside of FMPA is that if we got an ambiguous response from the IRS, then you have other issues that you have to deal with. But George is right. We have not received a written opinion. We have had verbal opinions from those 3 bond counsels.
Jim, then George is not correct, because George has information about the opinions from the bond attorneys, the FNPA's bond attorneys, because he knows that they've rejected this 3-year window, the so-called Plan A.
They have, in writing that is in the public record, raised their concerns.
Now, are you talking about the 2007 letter, which dealt with a different, completely different?
2009, there was a 2011, they were unwavering in their...
The IRS thing is more of a recent phenomenon in the last couple of years where that came about.
I think you're right, Jim.
Yeah.
Mr. Christopher,
But there's been at least 2 writings.
You need
will
to
you
turn your
please turn your microphone on?
You're right, Jim. It's a more recent, but there's been at least, it's been in the works for 3 years at least, and there's been at least 2 writings.
Correct. And so the issue really is that has been going back and forth with the bond counsel. And also there is a bond counsel representing FMPA out of D.C. that have been in touch with our bond counsel as well as FP&L bond counsel. And we have public documents to show for that because we're paying them. And that debate and that discussion over the 3-year issue has been the one with the IRS. And so that, but it, as previously noted, that has not, a document has not been produced at this particular time in order to facilitate that. And again, I'm not speaking for those attorneys. You would have to get each group. But what I took away from the table was that the framing of the question is the critical issue, and how you're going to get all the parties. FMPA would have to be a part to that, because whatever the result of that question is, FMPA would have to sign on and say, yes, we agree with this opinion.
Jim, you're basically correct, but just to amplify just a slight, because we have one lawyer at least up here. It's not so much a framing of the question, it's a statement of the facts. It's a statement of the facts, and you don't have a transaction where one party says, I'll buy the electricity at this price, and then do you meet the requirement. Rather, you have a purchase and sale of an entire utility. You have money flowing from several directions. And can you isolate, and will the IRS permit an isolation of this purchase and sale of a 3-year transaction and forget all the other facts surrounding, or will they look at all the facts and say, hey, there's too much consideration here. You can't separate it out neatly like the exception here, the 3-year exception looks for. And so the real job was going to be, you say stating the question, that's correct, but stating the facts.
That is correct, because there were some suggestions that, for example, the insertion of the Turkey Point into the discussions, is that a factor that affects the 3-year window? Because that could be considered outside of the realm of this transaction, which is the position we were taking, or there is a position that could be saying, well, the Turkey Point was done at the same time as the discussion of the 3-year bridge of the power, so therefore it should be included in the discussions, and so therefore it becomes an add-on to this transaction. And from the IRS, you cannot give any type of support in the transaction in order to get this IRS ruling. And that became a point of, became an issue of discussion, is tying in the Turkey Point to the 3-year window, because it was taking place at about the same time, and it was taking place between the two same parties, FP&L and OUC. So again, that we spent several hours debating that, because from the City of Vero Beach's standpoint, that was outside our scope. We didn't care about Turkey Point or anything else. Ours was the 3-year window. But trying to put it into how the attorneys talked about it, it would take you about 4 or 5 hours.
Is it safe to assume then that the respective councils for the city and the FMPA and FP&L haven't reached agreement on how to present the question and how to present the underlying facts to the IRS if you decided to go forward with an IRS ruling?
Yes, sir. I think that's very fair to say that they don't know how they would put that together. And you've got to remember, the IRS ruling is really going to be the document that FMPA has to take and protect itself going into the future. So the framing of that question is really going to be an FMPA. I mean, they've got to be very satisfied with the way that it would be framed, and that is an issue. But yes, the letter ruling became a very complicated discussion when you start doing that. And then when we went from what we refer to as, I guess, the Plan A, in which we were going to do something, and then we went to Plan B, then the discussions at the table came, well, wait a minute, now what we've done is, even though we're going to Plan B, that may have to be part of the IRS discussion as well, because you're doing other things, and what you're showing is a separation. And again, that makes the IRS issue even more complicated, because if there are some incentives being given that's ancillary to the IRS. You know, when it started out and it was going to be very simple, the 3-year window, and everybody except there were still questions, the FMPA was a very simple issue. But when you started tying all these other ancillary things in with it, it became a
Have you gone to law school?
No, sir.
Sounds like it.
Nor does he want to.
Mr. Chairman?
Well, it seems to me that FP&L and the city could have obtained from their respective councils a written opinion on the tax issues, and if the FMPA finds those satisfactory, the issue goes away. If they don't, it seems to me that somebody has to take the initiative, whether it's the city or someone else, to file with the IRS a request for a tax ruling and state the issue as they see it and state the facts as they see it. And obviously other parties are free to intervene and state the facts differently or add additional facts. But it seems to me, one way or another, somebody needs to get past this hurdle.
Or we find another alternative.
I do know from conversations that I've had with our transactional attorneys that our attorneys, Florida Power Light's attorneys, our attorneys bond Council or Tax Department, Florida Power and Light and OUCs are all willing to write an unqualified opinion that this does not violate the 3-year exception. And I do know that because I've had conversations, followed up on some city council meetings with the transactional attorney, and I just recently had a conversation with him between our meetings, and I'm just trying to keep things open, transparent. In that course of that conversation, he mentioned that there had been a public records request from Mr. Schuman. And I said, well, when you get that together, just if you wouldn't mind sending me a copy of that as well. And I just, the end of last week, I got a large notebook of information from them. And Jim and Wayne, you got a CC on that with the table of contents only. And I'll make that available to the rest of the commission. But it was a large notebook, and I have not had a chance to look at it in detail.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry.
George is first.
I just want to say something that I think is very, very important for everybody to understand. FMPA has put those 3 elements on the table, and there has been really no negotiations. I mean, the fact of the matter is that they've been there. The discussions really have centered around how to address each one of those concerns. That's been not really negotiations, but the variable of how you interpret the words, and that's challenges that we've really had.
So whose court is the ball in?
Well, I think right now the court is in the OUC and FP&L's court to try to resolve the issue, and they are working on it very diligently to see if we can get that transfer of the power contracts, because one of FMPA's biggest concerns, which was in their last piece of correspondence, even at $52 million, we would prefer you to find another outlet for that. So as we speak, we're really trying to work in that arena to try to resolve that issue. And then we've got to go back, and another little thing that FMPA has got to approve the assignment agreements. So we're going to have to address the elements in that assignment agreements, which are going to involve 35 attorneys, which is going to be a challenge, but it is the assignment agreements that are going to have to be sort of managed as we go forward and try to determine that. The meeting tomorrow, what I'm sort of hoping is twofold. One is that we will identify some of these costs associated for future exposures and future liabilities as FMPA sees on their organization. And if we, I'm not an attorney, I'm more, if you give me a number, let me try to figure out how to get to that number. And if we can quantify these issues, then we'll figure out what we have to do in order to get to that amount. And it could be that we buy an insurance policy, could get contract insurance. It could be it's insurmountable because the number's too high and we just can't get from here to there. And some of those issues have got to, getting it quantifiable has been really a real major challenge in all of this. And it's, in one of my conversations with Nick Gariello, and I may have shared it with some of you folks, is you set the date for our closing, we're going to come to the table and give you a check. It's sort of like when you buy a house or something. I'm going to satisfy our mortgage. Our mortgage happens to be a very convoluted, complicated set of contracts. We just come to the table, write you a check, and whether it's $50 million, $100 million, or $150 million, and then it's a business decision on our part. Can we get there? Is the transaction worth the value that's being placed? In the FMPA, somewhat in their defense, they are trying to protect. And one of the things that Fred said in our first meeting that I attended was you can show no risk to the FMPA. I'm not sure you can do a transaction that there isn't a change in risk value. Just the mere fact that we have 34,000 customers is a factor. And we've been trying all this time to negotiate and understand what is the value in using just that one element, 34,000 customers. What is the value of that we can write a check and try to relieve ourselves? And that's really been the challenge.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is all very interesting, but just how relevant is it to our business as a utility commission? We are not tasked with negotiating the transaction. We're not tasked with finding ways to get around this or that problem. And, we're not really achieving very much by this. I mean, I don't know what the concrete result is going to be, and it'll be whatever it'll be when the negotiations are finished. And then we can look at it and say whether we think that's a good deal or it's not a good deal.
Well, one of the things, George, that we do with this committee, one of the purposes that has developed in the course of this transaction, is that we are the place where we dig deeper into the details of the transaction. We have more time dedicated to looking at it. So it's for the public, so they can see some of these, so they can understand some of these issues as a transaction progresses. And so that is part of, I think that is an important function that we serve, because during the city council meeting, there's a lot of different things that have to be handled. Absent that may perhaps a special called meeting that they have had on occasion, they really don't have the time to bring this information forward. That's why we've had our attorneys to come here and go into detail through the transactions, and we've had some members from the public ask very hard questions about some very specific paragraphs and sections of the contracts. And so it is, I think, part of what we need to be doing here for the course of this transaction. One of the things that when we look at our goals, one of the things that I always want to remember is we have two utilities here, and we do have a bigger mandate than just this. So I want to, but I do want to keep this information flowing to the public and give the public an opportunity to get some greater details of the transactions, of the problems, and so as we can go forward, as hopefully we can all work together to achieve a goal, and hopefully FNPA is also working with us to achieve a goal. That being said, I know one of the dilemmas that we face in these transactions is FNPA seems to be asking for answers to questions that they haven't accepted, that they haven't accepted the framework. And for example, we've offered to provide, and Jim, this is going back to the conversation you and I had last week, we've offered to provide them bond insurance and to cover our obligation in the unlikely event that OUC defaults. And they've said, we don't know what, and that in these letters, these back and forth letters, they said, we don't know what that insurance would look like. They want us to engage financial advisors to decide what this policy looks like, which is estimated, I think, Jim, you said $100,000 would be the estimated cost of that, or what was it? Not the insurance, but just the looking into the insurance? Well, why don't you tell me exactly what you said?
Yes, sir. We have anticipated that if we hire a financial consultant and go through the discussions, and I'm not calling them negotiations with FMPA, it would run somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 in order to try to develop the documents that would be acceptable to FMPA in order to cover the issues. And the other challenge there is trying to define, and one of the things that we've asked FMPA to do is define the duration, because one of the things that we are tied with is when you do these tie into a power plant, and St. Lucie being an example, St. Lucie had to do modifications. It benefited us from the standpoint that we got additional capacity from a nuclear plant when they did that last year, but you also refinance those improvements, so therefore your financing can go out farther into the future. You cannot get, from what we're being told, and we have talked to some financial folks, you can't get a bond or you can't get contract insurance for something that has an indefinite period of time. You've got to define what it is you want to cover, therefore the insurance company does the analysis of risk, and then you buy insurance based on the risk exposure that they have.
But further, they haven't even accepted the framework that if we could do this in such a way that would satisfy them, that would then, they would accept that to solve this particular problem.
That is correct. The conversations we've had, for example, bond insurance, bond coverage, we have been told by FMPA they don't believe that bond insurance would cover the issues that they are dealing with. They have very little satisfaction in bond insurance, but they
even though they pay premiums for bond insurance.
Yes, sir, they do. But there has been discussion about contract insurance as a possible alternative to that. But we need to define, and in my opinion, and this is what I've told our legal counsel, is before we start hiring another consultant, let's find out what it is that we're trying to, what is the end game, define the terms, and then you go to a financial person and say, this is what it is. Financial advisors are not going to help you define what it is you want to cover. They're going to tell you how to cover what it is you've defined. And so that's been one of our challenges, is trying to define. Again,
and we're not asking FNPA to define the answer, but just to define the framework. If they define the framework that we could do this, they're not accepting how we do it, but at that point in time would be willing to invest the money with the financial consultants to come up with a proposal that we could then take to them. But we're not willing to do that absent a framework that this would solve the problem.
That is correct. That's at least one person's opinion, which happens to be mine. But yes, to me, you've got to define what it is that we are trying to cover in this negotiating back and forth. Let's get it in a box, and then we'll cover the box.
I think that's consistent with your opinion, as we've articulated here. It's consistent with the way they've handled other issues, like the issues of stranded costs. It keeps coming up that one of the stranded costs they're worried about is the potential of environmental contamination due to a spill at the power plant, a fuel spill. And we've told them, our attorneys have told them, you've told them, Jim, that we're going to indemnify you from any liability in that. And if you're working together to a goal, then I think that solves that problem, and you don't need to keep bringing that back up. Now, we can't give them the identification absent the deal, but we're not asking any consideration for that either. So these, I don't understand, and I keep seeing these same things that we provide a reasonable solution to, and yet they keep coming up as objections that we're not addressing. We have addressed the issue of environmental contamination. We've had studies done. We don't see any. We're willing to, if there is any that shows up, that we'll indemnify them. So it's frustrating to me to see these things keep coming back up, and that to me is indicative of they're really not moving forward to establishing the framework of a deal. So thank you.
Just for clarification also, in my last conversation with Nick Garriello, which was about 2 weeks ago, he did tell me that they were now working on, at least as it deals with the all requirements. And you got to remember, these are two components. You've got the all requirements exposure, and then you've got the OUC supplemental for future exposure too. So there are two different elements. And what we've been trying to do is let's take each one of these independently and let's resolve this one, then we'll worry, because the OUC obviously is going to be a much larger number because of the contingent liability going into the future. Hopefully, within the near future, we'll quantify what the exposure is on the all requirements. And that's one of those things that we'd be responsible for anyway, even if we go to 2016. At the end of that time, under the contract, they hand us a bill that says this has been your contingent liability and you're subject to pay that at that point. And so we're just asking them to do it. Even if they project it out to 16, the number, and if we close in 15 as an example, then we understand that's what the contingent liability.
Right.
So we are trying to get to those numbers.
We have told them that we would, if we could close if we could resolve the ARP issue sooner than 2016, that we would pay them our liability and the stranded cost at that time. And then if there was additional stranded cost by 2016, that we would pay that as well. And yet they go around and talk to their member cities and say that we're trying to get out of our liabilities, when it's constantly said over and over again that we're going to pay our liabilities. Thank you very much, Jim.
Yeah, and we have said that we would cover that. A real major issue here, and it's coming back to the legal discussion, FMPA never dreamed that you would be selling to a private company, and that's been repeated many times. If we were selling to OUC or Jacksonville or Lakeland or somebody like that, the issues would be much easier, but there was never any contemplation in all these contracts that we, the City of Vero Beach, have engaged with FMPA. And so this is really outside of the box, and it's very difficult to get people who are sort of comfortable with their environment to think outside of that environment, and that's been
And that might be the question that you come back with tomorrow is, in their opinion, is it possible for us to sell our ratepayers to a private entity?
I hope we come back that this is how much it's going to cost.
Okay.
One thing,
You're more optimistic.
Mr.
Chairman, if I
Chairman,
can complete.
Mr. Chairman,
I have a couple other
question.
people that have, Mr. Wilson, that have asked to make comments relative to this, and we'll come back to
the question.
Okay.
Can I have a question to
Sure.
is OUC going to be at the meeting? That's all.
No, sir, just the city and the FMPA.
I just wanted to know.
Rob?
I just want to go back to the original question that Charlie posed, and I've been on the commission as an alternate in the prior commission, and obviously now a full member. I've never had any conversations with FMPA or any other group other than the public meetings with FPL. But I do find it interesting with the whole question of who has access and what's the purpose of the access. Have they been directed by an individual or a group of individuals? And are they offering advice based on those discussions with FMPA? I don't know enough at this point, but I can say that in the past 5 years, at least the person that the question was directed to has never made a public comment to either the city commission or to this group or this committee to advise him of whatever opinions he arrived at as a result of discussions with FMPA executives. I find that to be extraordinary, and I think it potentially represents a conflict, and it's too bad it's happened that way. I think it has influenced decision makers, and it can't be reversed, obviously. What has happened, but I think it's somewhat disingenuous to deny involvement.
Mr. Chairman, if I may complete then, based upon that.
Okay.
For the record, and I believe that there has been a sunshine violation here. What we have found by virtue of this question, and I'm sorry it's made a couple of your members uncomfortable, I would like to pose it in any way that can be as civil as possible to pose the question. The fact is we have found after some prodding that there have been conversations privately with staff at least, with someone at the FMPA. And in further discussions, the gentleman said, it is clearly not at market value. He said, as if it were fact, that bond counsel is unprepared to offer an opinion, and he said that he gave his opinions on that the reasons that FMPA is blocking this sale are very valid reasons. All of those things are as a result of a conversation that happened that was not disclosed. It was not disclosed to the City Council when they decided they were going to take him to the FMPA to be part of the negotiations. It was not disclosed to this commission that met some week or two ago during that period of time. It's my understanding of the Sunshine Law that you are restricted about discussing items that are public when you're on a commission, or if you know that you will be voting on such a thing in some future date. As an example, if I were to be elected to the City Council but not sworn in yet, I could not go to somebody and decide what we were going to do for the next 3 meetings, even though I weren't on the commission at the time. Now, I am not a lawyer, as Mr. Christopher has well put out, and if I were, I'd be a terrible lawyer. So I'm not the person that can make this decision. But for the record, I suggest to you that there has been, if not a sunshine violation, you have hidden information that has been gathered by one member who has used that information to advise others and guide the discussion of this council without disclosure. At the very least, it is a complete lack of transparency that you should know when you're able to balance what's being told to you, especially by someone who has identified themselves as an attorney, even though I'm not sure you can practice in Florida. So my question is, I'd like to make official records request of any telephone records, correspondence from Mr. Christopher to FMPA, any of the numbers at the FMPA. This is exactly what happened when Jay Kramer admitted that he had been talking back channels to the FMPA, and he was required to give up his personal cell phone records, because what Mr. Christopher has already told us is that he has had enough discussions that some of the key points that are coming up before this council, he has already made a decision about. He has made a decision on those things based upon information that none of you have. He has said that he has this conversation, but he says he thinks that everything in the conversation was already made public, but there's no way to ascertain that. And he has not identified what dates it is where these conversations took place. So I officially protest and identify that I believe that there is a potential sunshine violation here, and I request that be investigated by the proper authorities, and at least now we know. Because it's not FP&L that's stopping this, it's FMPA. And we need to know whether FMPA is able to stop this because they're aided and comforted and provided information by the people that are supposed to be representing the citizens of this town. Thank you.
Mr. Wilson, thank you. And this, for the record, this committee is not where you need to address that, because we have no power to produce that. But I believe that you know that and know where to go if that's what you choose to do.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would like to address the issue myself, as having been on this committee for quite some time as both a member and an alternate, and I have at no time had any discussion with anyone from FMPA, FPL, or OCU any other time that was done in a public forum, nor have I had any contact with any person that is sitting on this committee in private or on the telephone or via email or written communication. And so therefore, I would say that I have not been tainted in any way with this.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Mr. City Attorney, if I may.
Okay.
The Sunshine Law is, as I understand it, to prevent private discussions amongst members of a committee or a group who have some kind of executive power, who can make decisions which will affect the public. Am I correct?
Actually, I'm glad you asked the question. Any one of you board members can talk with anybody else on the planet all you want, so long as it's not another member of your committee and talking about business that may come before your board. You can talk to anybody else you want. But Mr. Wilson did make one good point. Once you're appointed to a board, I would liken that to the same as once an elected official is elected, the Sunshine Law and Public Records Law goes into effect then. You don't have to wait till you're sworn in. It does become effective immediately once you're appointed or elected in the case of an elected official. But the Sunshine Law is really open meetings law. That means 2 or more members of the same body may not discuss business or the subject matter of something that may foreseeably come before that body. Other than that, you can talk about the weather, you can talk about baseball, unless you're baseball commission, whatever you want, so long as it's not business that has to do with your body. And it doesn't matter that it's a quasi-judicial board or just an advisory board, and I say just, an advisory board, an elected a governing body, doesn't matter. Any body that is conducting public business is subject to that open meetings law. And public records, keep in mind, anything you receive or generate or create that has to do with the business of city business or business of your board is a public record. That's why we always recommend don't use private phones, don't use your private computer at home. If someone does send something to you on your private computer at home, send it to your clerk of your board, and they'll basically archive that and keep track of it as the custodian of that. So long as the clerk's office has everything you have you can then readily say, clerk, I've had this request, and please provide this. Now, phone records are another story. You're obviously not going to turn over your phone bills every month listing all your phone calls, and that's all you get, obviously, on a phone record is the phone calls in and out, especially on cell phones, you get that. A landline, I don't even know anymore if you do that. I haven't had a landline in years, but anyway, I hope that answers your question and gives you some clarification as to what exactly is the open meetings law applicable to and the public records.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sir, I've got one clarification, if I may. If I haven't, but if I decide to call on my own an FMPA agent to ask a question, to educate myself for whatever's coming up, am I allowed to do that?
Certainly.
Okay.
But keep in mind, anything from your phone record to any documents exchanged that you receive or you generate is a public record, but it is not a Sunshine Law issue.
Yeah.
Okay?
When I have a follow-up question here, what about notes we might take during the meeting?
Notes are interesting. If they're transitory, in other words, it's just to, you're going to use that later and convert it to another document, they don't typically have to be retained. But if you do use those notes later or you share those notes with someone else, they can become a public record.
I suppose they're just pieces from a public record. Does that matter?
What do you mean by
In other words, if you're just to remind yourself, it's from a public record, but it's something just to remind you that you want to say something.
From a public record. I
got a question on the demand charge that's coming up. I've got several things that I've written down.
You know, here's the thing. If you want to always err on the side of not potentially violating something, either, and here we're talking about public records, give it to the clerk. Just let her put it in her backup for the meeting.
Okay. Mark?
Mark Mucher, 617 Indian Lilac Road. Scott, so much for your goal of a short meeting.
Well, can you help?
I'll try and
help with that.
I'll try and
Please help.
As a matter of full disclosure, I was admitted to law school, but I never attended. And to help answer Mr. Is it Baczynski? Is that how you say it? Good. Baczynski. Okay. To help answer your question about why Scott allowed us talking about those things, or allowed you to talk about those things, is one. I'll help him answer. He answered, but I'll put a little different spin on it. One, you might learn something, right, that you didn't know. Secondly, the city council, in a little bit of a deviation a couple meetings ago, charged this commission and the finance commission to be the education arm on the sale of Vero Electric. So I think it falls under both of those things. In terms of being an education arm, I just wanted to make a comment and put this in the record, and maybe it'll be reported properly, and maybe somebody will see it on TV or however. But after your last meeting, when it was discussed that FMPA would be invited, the twin bloggers and the phony papers and all kinds of illegitimate press, I'll call it, started printing cartoons of your chairman. They started using ugly names, saying, how dare he address the, address a letter to FMPA. He had no authority, blah, blah, blah. And as you all know, the city attorney was here, the city manager was here, most of the city council was here at that time, and a vote was taken, and he only did what he was instructed to do. So I don't see any blame on Mr. Stradley's part, but they obviously did, and there was no basis for it, no grounds for it. I guess I understand Florida Power and Light, and I'm changing subjects now. I guess I understand Florida Power and Light not being here, but I always have a problem with their numbers. And as part of your backup and part of the minutes from the last meeting, they taught, or from the city council meeting, they gave these comparisons of what the rates would be like if we did accept that $26 million interest-free loan. And it's titled talking about rates, but what they're talking about is bills, or what their discount or their savings refers to the bills. If you look at the rates, the savings are not 8 to 10%. The savings, if you look at the rates themselves, are 16 and 18% with 3 and 4 year payouts, respectively. Now, where they took some liberties that I didn't agree with is how they figure the bill. They made all kinds of assumptions. I've had some conversations with city staff on this, but one of the wilder assumptions, and perhaps Mr. Grealis can input into this, that they're assuming that all of a sudden Indian River Shores is going to charge a 6% franchise fee. So that's going to reduce their savings by 6%. I've never heard, and they never have before, they don't charge a city tax. I've never heard that they would, that they plan to all of a sudden reduce their residents' savings by charging a franchise fee. I know our city plans to, I know the county does, and the city of Sebastian does. We currently charge 10% city income or city utility tax, and we plan to continue doing that, but by some fluke, the city utility tax, according to Florida Power and Light's documents, instead of going down by 18% like the rates do, they go up by 50%. And there's just some flukes in the way that both the utility tax is currently administered and the way they read the Muni Code, I guess explains that. But it just seems to me the whole thing's crazy. But I guess my point is that the savings, that if this were to go through, and I know people are fighting it tooth and nail, but if this were to go through, the savings are much, much greater than what has been presented to date. And I think that's all I have, unless you have any questions.
Thank you very much.
I don't have an answer to your question on what Indian River Shores might do. I've never addressed the issue to any of the members of the Indian River Shores Council. I do know that Ms. Brunges made a presentation to them last week. I was out of town last week, so I didn't hear the presentation, and I don't know whether that question was raised and answered.
Well, I doubt that if you've never charged a city utility tax in the past, nor a franchise fee, both of which you were fully entitled to,
Mark,
that you would start it now. That's all.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
could I offer a thought? The question directly to you.
Oh, okay.
I've read every one of these documents, and I was interested in a memorandum, and I don't know who it's from. It was addressed to Mr. Christopher regarding the creation of a utility authority. And I don't recall seeing it before, but I guess my question to you, and perhaps you know the answer, is when this was submitted, to whom and requested by. It's a lengthy document. It's certainly more the conception. It's a detailed statement of what a utility would look like. If in fact this is something that someone has asked us to consider, or that you think we should consider, I'd like to know why, and why at this time. And perhaps you're more familiar with this. I'm not. It's the first time I saw it when it was distributed a week or so ago.
Well, I didn't ask that to be distributed. We did talk, Mayor Winger talked about the utility authority being one of the other answers. And so, but I think that the question of when and to whom, Mr. Christopher, did you?
Mayor Winger, among his various initiatives, was for us to consider a utility authority.
Yes, sir.
This is a document that I tried to give you last week to distribute among the members. You asked me to give it to the clerk. I gave it to the clerk, and the clerk distributed it.
Okay, thank you. I'm aware of that, and I think I introduced my question to you with that. Was this? But Rock's question was, when was this produced, and to whom was it initially addressed, or did you just produce it for us this last week, or in the last 2 weeks?
This document, I don't know when it was produced. I suspect it goes way back. It's a research document that was sent to me from FMPA.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I don't know the author of it. I don't know where they got it. There was a conversation about, is there any literature on this subject, and this was sent to me.
Okay.
It's a pretty good, I found it a pretty thorough, objective, non-controversial type of document that you can pull off the internet.
Okay. Well, thank you for sending that to us. And I probably, over the course of the summer, I think we'll maybe have time to come back and look at some of these things, discuss the utility authority. I would like to move now on to the next item of the agenda, which is our goals. And in the backup packet, you saw the goals of the old utility commission. Now we have a new utility commission, so I'd like to, I'd like to jump to page 2, skip over what we accomplished, and look at the goals for 2014. The one thing that I would like to suggest that we add under the electric issue is that we, and I thought that this was here, I made reference to it at the meeting on the 19th. We say under water sewer, continue to work with the staff on optimization of the water sewer utility. And with respect to the water sewer, if you're not aware, there is a document that was prepared for us by GAI Consulting on optimizing our water sewer. And we've been following those suggestions as we've deemed them appropriate and have had great success with that. I remember when we had the discussion of the 2014 goals, it was when I first mentioned that, I think staff had a budgetary heart attack over the thought that I was suggesting that we hired GAI to do another optimization study. But what I'd really like to do is some of the issues that came up, some of the 20 points that Peter brought up at that meeting, and we continue to work with the staff on optimizing the operation of our electrical utility, and in an effort to keep the cost down and therefore keep the rates as low as possible. Other than that's my one comment. Any other comments on the electric goals? And let me say this: what I'm hoping to accomplish today is a motion to approve 2014 goals for this commission. So, any other?
Well, maybe the new members should have an opportunity to study it and come up with their thoughts and observations by the next meeting, or is that you'd like to do it today?
Well, I'd like to do this today and move on. We have a lot to do, and this was in the backup. And I did mention on the 19th that this would be on the agenda today.
Could you possibly restate the change you wanted?
Okay, if you look at the second item under water sewer.
Oh, under water sewer.
Any work at staff?
I'd like to add that to the electric goals, and specifically with respect to some of the things we talked about on the 19th, without putting those things we talked about on the 19th in the goals. There is a list of 20 suggestions that Mr. Gorey is going to get to Jim, and you were going to do, what did you call that analysis?
A SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
Strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
You take each one of the items and you tell why are we looking at it, what are the strengths, and then what are the weaknesses. A lot of times you have drawbacks, you try to identify those, and then the opportunities going forward, do they have a long life duration that could help you going into the future, and then what are the threats that could be entailed in doing that.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, one other thing before I step down, because, I was afraid I was given an image that I'm anti-consultant. I'm an anti-consultant until you define what it is you want to do. An example would be if we go and try to optimize our electric utility, even if our negotiations are still going on and we're working on that area, hiring someone to help us negotiate with OUC, as an example, would be something I would not be opposed to, because I think we need to have some specialized interest in doing and reviewing some of those agreements. And so there are folks that are in the state of Florida that have PSC experience that know how to work through some of these contracts. So I'm not totally anti, I just want to make sure we define what it is that our goal as we move forward in that.
Well, thank you, and I spoke in a sort of light manner with respect to. I don't think you actually. It was more of a metaphorical budgetary heart attack rather than a literal heart attack.
Right.
So, but I appreciate your clarification there, and I did not mean to imply that.
Are you looking for a motion to approve these?
Yes.
I would so move.
I'll second.
Then we have discussion.
Okay.
So, Jack?
Yep, I just have one editorial comment on item 2. Continue to monitor and make recommendations. I think we should add to the city council on the sale of the electric utility to FP&L.
Okay.
I mean, we're not if you read it just straight the way it is, continue to monitor and make recommendations on the sale of the city electric to FP&L, that's not really what we're doing.
Okay, so
I would just recommend that we add, after the word recommendations, insert to the city council.
I agree, Gene.
Okay, so I'd like to just do these changes by consensus, unless we really get into something that we have a problem with, then we'll take a motion. So I would agree, that's fine. And do we have a consensus on duplicating the staff optimization thing item that I mentioned?
With one addition, that continue to work with staff on optimization. I kind of feel like there should be something about our participation in making the list.
Well, that's, I think that would, to my mind, be just assumed. That's what we do, is we would, we look at things, we're going to get the quarterly budgetary analysis.
That's a consensus.
We'll be able to look at things and sit back and say, well, let's look deeper into these issues. And
we had a more specific document from a consultant on the water and sewer. That was all. Yeah. But I'll go along with the group.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Okay.
Yes.
Could I suggest that staff be encouraged to make suggestions too? I mean, they know the equipment, they know the plant, they know the history. They may be in a better position than we are to say that such and such might be an area to improve operations.
Well, I think, yes, and I think, again, that's how we functioned in the past. None of us have all of us have some skills that we bring to this that are very useful. But just as staff brought forward the idea of paying off the 2003 issue or the 2008 issue, I'm not going to tell what issue, but the short-term bank loan, staff brought forward that idea in the analysis and brought that to us. And so that's, last year also, Rob Bolton brought to us a new bio-waste processor to do the solids. We spent several months actually analyzing that. We got actually samples of that before we made a recommendation to City Council that we invest in that. So these things are typically usually staff-driven. We don't, it's not really, we encourage them to do it. We need to be looking at the budgets and the variances. I tend to look at things, budgets and variances in the financial statement. That's my strengths that I bring. That's how I'm driven. Jane actually went to visit this plant where they were processing the biosolids and actually brought us a little jar of stuff so we could smell it. And thank you very much.
That wasn't so bad.
No, it wasn't bad at all. But that's all relative. But so we all bring our different strengths and to this committee. So I encourage us all to work in that area. But yeah, we don't. It's not up to us to decide, particularly where we need to cut. But if we get good ideas, then we need to run them past staff and sit back and say, we might want to be looking at staffing. One of the conversations that Jim and I had last week is, do we need, since the turbine that we have, and I'll go into this detail just to give an example, okay? The turbine that we have is not designed to be 5.2 combo cycle unit, is not designed to be a peaking unit. So when we have to put online, we need to raise the temperature slowly. So we can't instantaneously put this online. So the question I ask is, are we staffing properly, could we maybe adjust staffing so that on the rare occasions that this unit is called upon, we might need to bring in some overtime workers? And would that be cheaper to occasionally pay overtime workers than to staff the plant fully 24/7? Now, he brought up we did some simple of his SWOT analysis, and he raised some threat issues, and I really don't want to get into it here, but this is a sort of thing that I think it is thing that we do, and so we'll look at that in detail at another meeting.
Mr. Chairman, the only thing I was going to add is that I'll offer up any of the staff people that will be related to the topic at hand. For example, if we undertake discussions on the power plant, Tom Richards will be here, and he can give you total insight. And if anyone ever wants to visit the facilities, please either call me or call Tom or check with the clerk's office, and we can give you a tour, for example, through the power plant. But we can also give you a tour down at the airport, where we have our other T&D facilities, and getting to know and understand what the workings are. We highly encourage that if you have the time available.
Thank you.
Tom is here right now, right? No?
We need a motion.
We have a motion, and we have a couple
Amendments.
Suggested changes. What about water sewer? Any thoughts on that?
You need a separate motion on that?
I don't think so.
I think it's together.
I would just clarify your motion when you're done to include everything.
I think it's okay.
Yeah, I think the water sewer is comprehensive.
Okay.
Well, I'll clarify my motion to incorporate the items mentioned during the discussion.
Okay, and I want to just add one further thing. I want to continue to monitor, continue the industry standard maintenance of the facilities. We don't actually perform the maintenance. We just monitor, and the staff keeps us up on that we are keeping the facility up to both facilities up to standard. Yeah, well, actually, I want to, the word monitor is down in the water sewer area, and I want to change that to monitor up in the electric.
I want to add or better to that maintenance. That sounds
Well, I think we're contractually obligated to maintain the system to industry standards right now in our contract with Florida Power and Light. And some of the discussions that we've had relative to this is, do we need to do this now? Is this an item that we can forego? So that we had that discussion relative to the work that we had done on units 2 and 5, and we have discussed we're not going to maintain unit 1 to industry standards. We've decided to let unit 1 die a natural death, as it were. So, okay. So, with that, anything else? Okay. Do we have a motion? A second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Motion carries. Anything else to come before us today? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we'll start.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Left to right.
Looking at what we got, Jim, on the OUC bill for February, there was a demand charge of 93 megawatts of $1.178 million. To me, that was a complete waste. One, according to your PA August contract report, OUC contract requires that OUC supply all of the city's incremental power after the output of Stanton's 1 and 2, St. Lucie, and the city's old power plant. The city's power plant was never turned on in January or February. So therefore, to me, OUC should pick up the amount of that 93 megawatts that would have been supplied by our power plant, because they didn't turn it on, and we could have cut that. I mean, $12,673 a megawatt is what its demand charge is. Secondly, we went into this in 2007 when we were getting out of our contracts. And we had a cold spell. We knew we were going to have, we might get into a demand charge. What we did was we went out to the residents, I did to my residents and other people did, and said, please, we knew what time. Usually the peaking is between like 8 and 10 in the morning, or 7 and 10 in the morning, and 4 and 7 at night. We said, would you please turn off your pool pump? Don't do any laundry. Don't do your dishwasher during these periods. And we did not get a demand charge because we lowered our demand by doing that. Our residents responded. And, you know, this is ridiculous. $1 million in 1 month due to a demand charge when we could have gotten out of it. And I think we need to do something about that.
Want me to address it?
Yeah.
Okay, under our contract with OUC, we pay for a capacity charge for 93 megawatts. Last year it was like 98 megawatts. We have a capacity charge that we pay no matter how many megawatts that we use there. The second thing is the demand charge per megawatt is fixed in that contract, and it's an escalating upward cost if you look into the contract. So the 93 is a capacity as much as a demand charge. Under that same contract, dispatching of our units has to come at the direction of OUC. They control the gas and the fuel. So they have to dispatch enough gas to us in order to run the plant. We can't unilaterally decide we're going to run the power plant. It has to come under the terms and conditions of the contract, and they control the fuel, which is obviously the essential. Going back on the control, the demand charge that you had, that was back in the CROD days when we were getting out of the all requirements, and we had that window that we had to keep our demand down. The theory there is that we were on the hook with all requirements for so many megawatts, and we wanted to stay under that demand. The utility director at that time did an outstanding job, because rarely does anybody get out at zero, which is what he did. And you're right, the community really chipped in and made that happen. But that really doesn't help us in our capacity charge with OUC. Now, it does help the individual homeowner, not necessarily from a demand charge, but from a consumption issue where their rates will go down. But the 93 megawatts are based on a projection of what our needs would be for the 2014 period. In about September, they'll be projecting what we will need in 2015, and that is a unilateral decision by OUC under the contract. Now, in 2017, if they come back and want to adjust any of those numbers in our demand charge per megawatt hour, we can open up the contract again for further negotiations. But Jan Asperu from the OUC has indicated that they are willing to talk to us about our contract and some of those terms and conditions that we have in there. For example, the dispatching of our plant, we feel like that it should be on an economy as opposed to a network system. And what OUC is taking advantage of is the network. They have to run either Stanton 1 or Stanton 2, so they're not going to dispatch our plant at any time because they have the base load that they have to meet and that they can get off the market. And our units can't really compete, for example, with nuclear power that's even in the market, and some gas that they can even buy from FMPA, as an example.
So this is not really a demand charge.
It's not really a demand charge, it's a capacity charge. They reserved up to 93 megawatts at a fixed price. If we go and we need 96 megawatts in this year, then they buy those other 3 megawatts off the market. And if it's during a real peak demand time, then those 3 megawatts could cost us more than what's in our contract. But at the same time, if the market's flooded as it is today, it could be a lower price.
Yeah, but $12,000 a megawatt for that demand? That seems high.
And I'm not familiar with those numbers. I do know that capacity cost, what you're paying for is for them to reserve that amount of capacity for you, and you pay that whether you use it, and then you pay X number of dollars per megawatt hour for that you consume.
Yeah, because on that same bill, there's 22,000 megawatts, and it only costs us 800,000.
Well, on that same bill from FMPA, you have 415,000 just for the plant to stand by, whether it's on or off, because we pay a fixed cost.
Is this capacity charge just a monthly charge that stays the same each month based on the 93 megawatts?
Yes, sir, it is.
So every month we'll see a 1.1 million or whatever that number
Well,
is?
I'm not really sure all those numbers, because in the capacity charge, there could also be included the megawatts we use, and they go together.
So this is the bill. This is where I got it from. And the top two figures there. And I saw that demand charge, and to me, a demand charge is something that pay when you go over your amount.
Yes, sir. And it's the PPA capacity and energy charges. So that's a combination of the two. But no, that's not over and above. Our 93 is a fixed number, and we pay for that, for them to reserve the capacity, X amount of dollars a month.
Okay.
And then we have to pay, and I think it's like $14 and something right now per megawatt that we actually consume.
Okay.
So the real capacity charge is you back out the actual monthly usage or consumption and back out that cost, and then the capacity charge is what's left over.
Yes, sir. It's either called capacity charge or fixed charge.
Well, actually, that 93 is fixed.
The 93
is fixed. 93 megawatts is a fixed number.
In other words, that 1 million is there, whether we use it or not.
Yeah, that's the way I would understand it.
That's which sounds a little high. But anyway.
Is the 1.1 million just the fixed capacity charge, or does it include consumption?
No, there's a second item down there, consumption of $900,000.
Okay.
Well, you have the demand charge, which is your capacity charge, and then you have your energy charge, which is the 22,000 megawatts that you're talking about, which is the 974, 252.
Right.
So we
Jim, could we, in a future meeting, have Tom and Cindy here and some bills so we can really develop an understanding of the bills?
Not a problem.
Okay.
I'll be brief, I hope. I've been thinking about this whole question of representation in the meeting that's going to occur on Wednesday with HMPA. Yeah, thanks. I was thinking of a medical society. And we've had some debate about what would be the appropriate representation. For a couple of reasons, I think that it would be wise of this group to support a motion that would ask the city council to consider having you accompany the mayor and the city manager. I think it adds some confidence to the process. It will provide for, in my opinion, transparency, which we're all seeking, particularly given some of the misunderstandings that have occurred, and some public accountability. And I don't know whether the city will accept that view. They may not. But we are an extension. We serve at their will, of course. But I would move that this commission consider your appointment and our delegate, if you would, to those deliberations that are going to occur on Wednesday. And if it fails, it fails, and that's fine. But I think there is value in having you present and making your own observations, perhaps somewhat independent of others, and in a position to report that to the city.
Well, Rob, before we get a second, I need to say something here. If it were May 2nd, I would be very honored by your request. But tomorrow is April 2nd.
Tomorrow's April 1st.
April 1st. So the meeting is on April 2nd.
Yeah.
and I cannot do that. I don't have the time to contribute to this with my work schedule. So I thank you. I'm honored that you would say so, but
I think it's unfortunate that you're not
I got one other quick thing. The FP&L keeps talking about their $52 million, and that is effective if we close on 1/1/2015. If you read the literature, you'll find out that if we close later than that, that $52 million drops by $1.45 million every month. And what I'd like FP&L tell us, what does our portion then drop each month if it closes after 1/1/15?
Well, I think that's a very good question. I think one of the things to clarify that it's all our portion. This is what we're having to pay to have someone take the electricity under the all requirement, well, not the all requirements project, but the two Stanton projects and the St. Lucie project, between the date of closing and the date of the OUC, assuming them in 2018, I believe. So it's all, the $52 million is all the city's, it's our whole, that Florida Power and Light has offered to pay for half of it and loan us the other half of it. So it's not something that's their cost of acquiring the system. That being said, my assumption, I believe it's reasonable to that, Herb, is that it would ours would go down by half. The part that they would loan us, the part that they would pay would go down by half, and the part that they would loan us would go down by half. And I think it's really a sweet deal if somebody came and offered to pay off half of my debt and loan me the other half of it interest-free. I think that's really a very generous thing. That being said, I'd like to schedule the next meeting and then adjourn. And I would request that we look at dates after April the 15th.
Well, your normal regular meeting, your next one would be on May 13th.
On May 13th.
Yeah, also, if we could have a regular meeting, every month, the same time.
What would our normal meeting date in April be?
Well, that would be next week. That would have been April 8th.
Okay. Was any time available on, say, the 18th?
On the 18th?
On the week after April 15th.
He's getting after it.
What day? You want to do Tuesday or what day?
He said Tuesday.
Tuesday the 22nd?
Okay, that would be what about Tuesday the week before? Anything?
On the 15th?
Oh, on the 15th. Oh, never mind. Okay, the 22nd. How's the 22nd work for?
It's Earth Day.
Pardon me?
It's Earth Day.
That's Earth Day.
That's a good day.
That would be a good day to have it.
Perfect day.
Okay.
Turn some more up.
That's fine. Okay.
10 o'clock?
10 o'clock. And then we'll have it, then what was the meeting in May?
May 13th, did you say?
Right, it would be May 13th. The Utility Commission would normally meet the second Tuesday of the month.
Okay, and so I'd like to suggest that we generally keep to that schedule. It seems to have worked. 10 a.m. 10 a.m.
Will we be inviting FPL back at that time?
Yes, at some point in time. Yes. So, okay.
What was the date that we?
And then May 13th. And then second Tuesday after that, unless there's a change. Okay. With that being said, a motion to adjourn.
So move.
All in favor?
Aye.
And we are adjourned. And